Hello friends, and welcome back to McKenna Talks Games, where today I am super excited to be able to talk to you about another LARP that I was able to participate in. It was just over a week ago in Toronto, Ontario, and it was a Vampire the Masquerade one-shot run by Farescape Studios. Farescape Studios is a Toronto-based organization that runs several events throughout the year, so if after hearing my spiel you want to check them out, I have provided a link in the description. They are amazing folks, and spoiler alert, they run awesome games. So, if you are, in any way local to that area, or just, want to make the trip, yeah, give them a look-see. I know that they would love to have you at their events. So this one, like I said, was a Vampire the Masquerade one-shot. It was set in the 5th edition universe, though it did not use 5th edition rules. It did rely on the setting. The rules were the Nordic-style consent-based mechanics, similar to those used by my previous LARP, The Night in Question, Convention of Thorns, and other more narrative theatrical events like those. So the premise of the game, which it was called Nelly's by Night. I should probably do a title drop since I put it in the title of the video. So yeah, Nelly's by Night. The backstory is that the Restoration-era British actress and lover of the British King Charles II, Nell Gwyn, along with Charles II, did not actually die, but were embraced and sailed to Toronto, where they set up shop and claimed domain over the city. Charles as the Camarilla Prince, and Nell as the protector of the various ladies of the night wandering Toronto streets over the centuries. She set up a whorehouse, basically, the best way to say it, where she provided both blood and physical pleasures to the kindred of the city. Her doors were really only open to members of her inner circle, up until the events of the game, which was set in modern day, where she has hosted a party inviting all kindred who were available to attend. So we had characters from all sorts of groups. There were members of the Camarilla, there were anarchs, we had some folks from the Ministry of Set, some humans who wandered in off the streets, members of the circulatory system, who, for those who aren't familiar with 5th edition, are a human trafficking ring dedicated to bringing blood dolls to where kindred need blood dolls to be. So yeah, there were a lot of groups in there with a lot of rivalries. It was nuts. But I am not really entitled to speak to all of those stories. I am really only entitled to speak to my character's stories. And my character was a member of Nell's home. So I will, I guess, first introduce the characters in Nell's home and then talk about my character's plot. Of course, you did have Nell Gwyn, who was an NPC played by Nicole, who was one of the two who founded Farescape Studios, and her childer, Raphael, who was the middle child, a sort of charismatic, entitled party boy, who Nell had named her heir, and her youngest child, Lauren, who was a dedicated daughter who just wanted her home and her kindred mom to be safe. So very, very nice girl, but still kind of a baby in the eyes of kindred society as a whole. There was the staff. That included Nell's ghoul, Dolores, who, in addition to providing services as a professional dom, also ran the day-to-day responsibilities of the house. So if you needed something done, you went to Dolores. If you had an issue with any of the other people in the house, you went to Dolores. If someone was trying to negotiate your services for either flesh or blood, they would go to Dolores, and then Dolores would go to you. There was the security staff, consisting of a Tremere sorceress named Miss Delva, who handled wards and other supernatural deterrents, and a doorman named Locke. Yes, that's a pun, and I think it's awesome. I don't know if he was actually Kindred. I assume so, but I didn't really talk to him long enough to get his clan. There were the working girls. That included a bruja named Angie, who was a little too fond of the drink, but looked out for the other girls in the house and was kind of like a big sister character. There was Willow, who was an aging human blood doll, whose blood was known to be of particularly high quality. And then there was myself. I played Sonia, the newest blood doll, who hadn't actually been fed from yet and was feeling very nervous about the events of the evening. And then there was Ambrose, a Tremere academic who was in charge of taking care of the blood dolls and making sure that their vitae was always in prime condition. So as the newest member of the house, my character actually spent a lot of time with Ambrose. He had taken her in off the street and made her his pet project. And my character's personal plot was that he had refined her blood to such an extent that it was in a near constant state of dyscrasia, and the right to tap that blood font was being auctioned off to the highest bidder at the party. And the bidding was done via silent auction. So everyone passed bids to Dolores, and then she announced the winner at the end of the evening. So there was a lot of anxiety in my character. Sonia was really, really worried about who was going to end up purchasing her. She knew that they couldn't take her from the house, that the auction was only for the right to her blood, but she wasn't sure just how they would treat her, or whether or not they would just drain her dry the moment that they got her in a room alone. So she spent a lot of time talking with the other members of the house, trying to get a feel for the guests and figure out who she could trust and who she couldn't. She met a blood doll in the circulatory system, Grace, who, though I didn't get to interact with her as much as I would have liked, that was a really cool dynamic to have, because Sonia had been kept in luxury in Nell's home, and though she was anxious about who was going to buy her, she did always have some semblance of agency. Whereas Grace was dragged around from location to location and really had no say in what was done to her. And we actually tried to rescue Grace from the circulatory system later on in the evening, but unfortunately the players had to leave before the end of the night, so that didn't end up happening. Curses. But yeah, so the early part of the evening for me was mostly social, keeping close to Ambrose and Delva because they didn't want to let me out of their sights on the off chance that someone decided to get a little bite happy before the auction actually ended. Midway through the evening, it became clear that my character was in a modicum of danger. One, because people didn't actually trust that my blood was safe to drink. They thought that since I was working with a Tremere, and Tremere are never trustworthy, that it was some sort of trap. And also, the circulatory system had put a bid in on her, and there was talk that the circulatory system was trying to undercut the auction so that they themselves could have a greater foothold in the blood trade in the city. So this worried Ambrose and Miss Delva quite a bit. And it worried Sonia too, of course. Everything was worrying Sonia. But everyone was sort of protective of my character as I was the newest. And so they didn't want me to see me put in a place where I would be harmed. So rather than trust blindly that whoever bought me was going to treat me well, Ambrose and Delva decided that they should probably sabotage things themselves to make me, one, less valuable, and two, try to pin something bad on the circulatory system to maybe get them kicked out of the house. So they decided that one of them should drink from me first, and it ended up being Ambrose, which was totally cool with my character. And so we had this really cool scene where we were alone in a room talking about how we were going to work this plan and whether or not we actually wanted to do it and sort of betray the trust that Nell had in us. But, you know, was it really worth it for me to go through with this auction when there was so much uncertainty? So that's what we did. Ambrose did bite Sonia first, and then Sonia rather made a show of going back downstairs, all woozy and anemic, basically, where we then had to work out what happened with Nell and Dolores and the other members of the house, who actually had their own plans for trying to fuck up the circulatory system. So it was one of those situations where if people had talked to each other, everything would have been great, but they didn't talk to each other, and so things kind of got fucked up. Messed up. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. In order to sort of hide this mess up on the part of Ambrose and myself, Ambrose actually did end up putting in a bid on Sonia, and we rigged the bidding so that he would actually win. So at the end of the evening, Sonia got everything she wanted. She was with someone she trusted, and she had sort of a secure future in Nell's home. So that was what happened with her. Of course, there were things going on all throughout the evening with other people. The primary drama for a lot of the characters was that Prince Charles had succumbed to the effects of the beckoning and had disappeared from Toronto, and that Nell herself was also starting to feel the effects of the beckoning. So that provided some uncertainty for members of the house as well as the greater Camarilla population in the city. So I know that a lot of the characters were going around trying to corral the Primogen to try and excuse me, try and get them to work together, while other people were trying to look to the prince's child, who actually ended up getting staked. He had a ghoul that he brought with him who ended up embracing at the party, which was a terrible idea. So we managed to save the ghoul's life. Nell decided to take him in, but the prince's heir had to pay for those crimes, so he was put down for a very, very long nap. We also had some humans there who claimed they were just there for the party, but were actually agents of the Second Inquisition and ended up compromising the entire thing. They hid a wiretap in their shoe, I think. So by the time the evening was out, there was definitely some uncertainty as to whether or not any of the kindred in the house were actually safe anymore. I know that Lauren's player, who was one of my friends, had a great time just running around, learning secrets and getting people to where they needed to be. Her story didn't involve a lot of big plot twists, but she set out to do something and she got exactly what she expected, so that was cool. And yeah, so that I guess sort of gives you an idea of, you know, the setup of the game and whatnot. The primary draw of the game, though, aside from the events, I think what really shone through was the location. The organizers booked the Darling Mansion in Toronto, which is an estate that was built in the 1800s, and then the current owner repurposed it into her personal art gallery. So, excuse me again. It is a very, very cool, oddly decorated place. You can rent out individual rooms on Airbnb. There's a collective of artists that live on the 3rd floor. It's a really cool place, and the atmosphere of it, I think, lended a lot to the enjoyment of the game, just being in this wonderfully decorated, very avant-garde environment. It felt like the perfect place for a vampire game, and particularly a vampire game of these particular themes. So yeah, I think that yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of at a loss for words still. Guess talk about the way it was run. Like I said, it was a Nordic style game, so there weren't a lot of hardcore conflict resolution rules, and I think that Farscape Studios did a really, really good job of communicating those rules and what was expected of players going into this. They did have safety workshops, though rather than hold those on site, they did a series of live streams over Facebook and YouTube that people could watch live and ask questions or review later, which was great because I personally was traveling like 8 hours to be there, and it would have been really tight for me to make those workshops had they been held in person. So I liked being able to review them at my own pace from the comfort and safety of my own home. And just because these workshops online did not mean the staff was not accessible. They were 100% accessible. You could send them a Facebook message, an email, and they were always super prompt to respond. And, you know, willing to answer any and all questions you had. I never at once felt like the staff was removed or did not care about the safety and well-being of the players. They held the in-character building workshops at the house before the event, which I think I would have appreciated just a little bit more time for those, because there were some where, you know, you broke into character groups and were starting to talk about some relationships or things that you might not have hashed out prior to the game, and I felt like maybe like 20 minutes more would have been great, but that wasn't a super big detriment at all to the game. And yeah, so I think my really one complaint wasn't the fault of the organizers at all, but it felt like towards the end of the evening, especially with the Camarilla, there were a lot of conversations that were happening behind closed doors, and people who were not involved in those may have felt a little bit left out. They actually did try to mitigate that towards the end of the game, where Nell actually proclaimed there is a no closed door policy in this house unless you're feeding or having sex. But just to try to, you know, make sure players were involved and to make sure that the people in the rooms were being safe. But yeah, that's really just my biggest complaint. Overall, it was a fantastic game, and I really, really hope they do another one, because I would be on that like white on rice. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's been a while since I've posted anything. I am still getting the hang of this regular update thing, by which I mean I'm not getting the hang of it at all. But yeah, I will hopefully see you all next time on McKenna Talks Games. I do have actually a list of content that I want to put up in the coming weeks, so be on the lookout for that, and I will see y'all next time.